Cool. So tell us about yourself.
So yeah, a little bit about me. Essentially, my parents are immigrants. They're from the Czech Republic, and I was the firstborn here in the United States, actually Minnesota, in the wonderful year of 1983. And I pretty much spent my whole life growing up in Southern California, with the exception of 5 years in Florida, where I actually went to school. I went to USF out there, and my major was mathematics, believe it or not. And I minored in physics, and I actually did that for about 5 years until I just cold turkey gave it up because my intuition was buzzing that was not where I wanted to be and definitely not what I was seeking for. You know, I feel like the physical science are very limited in terms of what it can actually teach you. Yeah. So after that, I came out to Los Angeles, where I've been about 8 years now. We're going on to 8 years, and my primary interest have been for those 8 years everything from Illuminati, occult sciences, conspiracy. I've been very heavy into just general spirituality, Kundalini yoga, the Vedic literature, the Upanishads, which is a subsidiary of Vedic literature, and a lot of Gnosticism, Freemasonic stuff. I've been, I studied morals and dogma for many years. Yeah, and that's kind of where it is, which led me to start actually developing the Pyramid Center. A lot of this knowledge.
Okay, well, we're going to get into that right away. I just want to let our listeners know I forgot to plug your website, thepyramidcenter.org. You can find that on the World Wide Web. I posted it here in our lovely chat room at freedomslips.com. Come down and join us. If you've got any questions for Joe further on in the show, he'll be here for 2 hours, and you can ask that in our chat room here, freedomslips.com. If you want, Joe, we can open the phone lines further down the line if you'd like. Yeah, we've got
no problem. And it's the pyramidcenter.org. Did you say .com?
No, .org. .org.
Oh, .org.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah,
sorry.
There's many pyramid centers out there, but none like this one. None like this one. I definitely guarantee you. If you look at his videos, it is quite an interesting spot. So let's get into that. The Pyramid Center. What is it, and what does it have to offer?
So what I essentially have, like we discussed a little earlier, I actually was very fortunate some years ago in acquiring 237 acres in the San Bernardino Mountains, completely secluded by natural forests and essentially untainted, undeveloped land, where I was inspired many years ago to build a type of spiritual intellectual nexus. And essentially what that is what I want people to do is have the ability to go somewhere which is completely broken off from regular contemporary society and kind of catch up with themselves, with their inner spirit, and have the ability to study any kind of spiritual tradition or any kind of religious traditions, and basically explore all the conscious traditions that are out there without necessarily polarizing to any dogmatic tradition, whether it be, Christianity, Judaism, or the Kabbalah, or numerology, or even any of the more occult sciences. Just basically explore their consciousness, be able to meditate, be able to exchange ideas and concepts with like-minded people, because of course it is going to be a smaller community that will be permanent there as well as visitors just coming in and out. And so, yeah, after just kind of, again, years and years of research and study into this stuff, I kind of noticed that there are, there's the vast majority of people who really don't care about what's going on, which is very unfortunate. They're just, I guess, the zombies of society that, love the cell phones and love the TV and love the game shows. And
don't point the finger too much. Hey, I was one of them a few years back. I'm sure
I'm
sure you were too.
Right. I was absolutely, and not every tunnel has light at the end. So I'm not necessarily saying that it's hopeless, because it isn't, but everybody comes to their own revelations on their own time.
Very good.
And, there's those people who want to do something now,
Yeah.
And after, again, because I was fortunate enough also to associate with some relatively high profile people, then I kind of began to notice it wasn't a conspiracy as much as it was people ignorantly volunteering to be part of a system which wasn't essentially good for them,
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is offer a remedy in that respect, that I would be able to, people again would be able to come to meditate, to explore other facets of themselves, of consciousness, of their spirituality, and, essentially take that, whatever it is that they learn, and then apply it to society as a whole. So, one of the good things about what we will be doing up there is people can come for a couple hours if they want, or they could become permanent residents, or they can stay there for a week. So again, it's something very unique and dynamic what we're doing up there. Something that to my understanding doesn't currently exist anywhere in the world.
That's a very good point. And that's the pyramidcenter.org. You can definitely get a hold of Joe through that website and maybe take a visit out there. That sounds pretty interesting. Does the weather stay pretty warm up there all year round?
Yeah, actually pretty much except for, I would say, January through March, it rains up there, and some of the roads, they wash out as a result of it. But otherwise, if there's no wind up there, it's actually pretty comfortable all year round.
Okay, very good. I was looking through some of your videos, the ones that I found on your website, and it speaks of ancient Alexandria. Now, I'd like to understand a little bit more about what ancient Alexandria was, and maybe if you'd like to elaborate, we can go from there.
Okay. Well, what ancient Alexandria was, it was, of course, a type of mystery school / city which was set up by Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC. And Alexander's intentions were to try and actually avoid the dogmatic tendencies, if you will, of spirituality and religion. So he created, something of a type of university, but it was also a city because it was a massive location, where essentially the philosophers and the mystics and the religious-minded people, they could all come together and exchange ideas. They could, meditate if they wanted to. They could participate in many different aspects of spirituality. So if you were a Christian, then, you could study Christianity on Monday, go study numerology on Tuesday, and on Wednesday you can go look into the Kabbalah and the Talmud. And it's essentially never ended, because the idea was to kind of get the underlying tone of all these dogmas rather than necessarily polarize to one ideology and then become, another ism, a member of the isms, as it were. So, that's what ancient Alexandria really was. Of course, Papal Rome, and I believe it was around 300 AD, it really attacked that whole concept and, considered them devil worshippers and pagans, and then they pretty much eliminated it. And allegedly they burned all the books and the library. I don't think they burned the books. I think they took the books and burnt the library down, and, because they claimed they were heathens and devil worshippers and whatnot. But yeah, that's essentially what I want to do. Allow people to explore their inner potential without being, put into a class or a dogma, or, a polarized religion. Just be able to come, be yourself, explore yourself, and then leave as yourself.
Okay, a non-profit organization, if I remember reading somewhere.
It is, yes.
Yeah, and you get all the comments that come with YouTube and what have you, which are pretty silly. I do have a YouTube channel. And
and I guess the plus side is most of them are pretty good. I think on like a like to dislike ratio, I have something like 93 or 94% likes, and then there's 7 to 6% dislike, which in my book is actually relatively well. So I'm not complaining.
What's not to like? After reading a lot of what I've seen in some of your videos, some pretty profound words, and you're only a year older than me, and I guess I went wrong somewhere, because the intellectual level there is just incredible. I'm blown back. You're before your time, if you'd say.
No, and it's because I think what it is, everything is good and bad, and I get that a lot of people, the whole intellectual thing, and it's like it just serves a purpose. It in itself won't get you anywhere. If anything, it's just like Albert Pike said, intellects are just better slaves. So
yeah, but you did a great job at feeding.
Thank you.
Feeding your mind was where I'm getting at.
Right.
Okay, so ancient Alexandria, that was the idea of what you are building there, and I think it's been in the work for a few years now, and really, getting off the ground right now. I think you've done some pretty high profile, like you mentioned, some pretty high profile people and radio shows lately. Right. So getting the word out, pretty cool. But what gave you that will to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy a piece of land and I'm going to make this for the people? What gave you that will, that courage, if you can?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, it's actually to go into the full story would be pretty extreme for your listeners. So I'll try to give you guys the cliff notes of it. But it was actually a combination of successes and failures. The successes, of course, just having the natural yearning ability to want to read extreme political ideals and credos. Like, again, I've studied everything from the mystic Kabbalah to the Vedas, and everything from the protocols of learned elders of Zion. I even have original copies of Mein Kampf, which was Adolf Hitler's alleged book, credo. And studying this stuff versus how to remedy the potential problem of globalism, or the world crises, if you will. And then, of course, my own personal stuff. I don't know, like, to me, it just, especially when I was younger, not so much now, it used to just really bring me down because, in a lot of respects, when you kind of first approach this, it seems very hopeless, the whole problem, the world problem with the bankers and the religions, and the corrupt ABC organizations, which are, criminals, to put it lightly. Yeah. And, it just truly seems hopeless because on the one hand, everybody knows what's going on, but nobody can really do anything about it because they all work behind the scenes in kind of a shadow form. And, and then, your first instinct is to want to get angry and aggressive at them. But then the best thing you can do is honestly educate yourself intellectually and well as spiritually. That is the best defense against these people. And that's really what inspired me to do it, is because I said to myself, well, how can you really get around being, a corporate slave of corporate America, and the U.S. corporation, and essentially be a slave from the day you're born to the day you die. And the end result I came to, again, without going into massive details, is to intellectually and spiritually educate yourself enough to understand why it is that they have the power that they have. Because there's a reason behind it. It's not arbitrary,
We give them that power.
Well, right. We do give them that power, but also it's a voluntary, because we don't have the power currently. We possess the potential, but currently we don't have the power because of, generations of degeneration, whether it was through alcohol or partying or entertainment, while, they might have been studying the scriptures, as it were, and they were I don't want to say purifying themselves, but they were just becoming more intellectually and spiritually more refined, while the rest of the race was kind of dumbing down, of course, by their will, because they provide all the entertainment and whatnot. But it's a very interesting dynamic. It's not, like I said, it's not so much a conspiracy as rather people's inability to understand, or their lack of understanding, rather, of what's really going on. Because once you get it, I don't know, if you know about like the whole sovereignty and the UCC stuff, which kind of ties into like the magic, which is like Kundalini yoga, and the judges essentially they work on a really magical basis and a magical system, and the Vatican probably operating in black magic, and that's how they come up with a lot of their authorities. It gets really wild when you start getting to the higher echelons.
Let's go as deep as we can down the rabbit hole, as much as you want to go, man. We got your back here. we want to know. We want to know exactly that. You like the Illuminati. I definitely get that feeling that you definitely like to understand what it's all about, and then the correlation with astrology. And you're pretty, like you said, you dealt with math, and math has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So give us a background, give us an idea. What's this Illuminati have to do with things, and where does that come into play here?
Well, with the Illuminati, it's difficult to say where they truly originated from. Of course, the conventional theory is 1776, the Bavarian Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt, Bavaria, 1776. That's kind of the accepted and conventional, I don't know if you want to say conventional wisdom that's accepted out there. I personally think that it's much, much, much older than that. And again, because of some of the scriptures that I've read, even in the Talmud, even in Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike refers to Julius Caesar actually being an Illuminati, and he specifically entitles him the first Illuminati, Julius Caesar, which is interesting because, now we're talking basically the inception of Rome, the Roman Empire, and really what today is currently known as the Vatican. Which, goes into that dynamic. Are they basically being the protagonist and the antagonist, which a lot of people suspect, the whole problem, and then they bring in the solution, model. And, that in itself is what it is. I've never been too concerned with, with the reason behind things, like was the government behind 9/11? I mean, even, I think they were, but even if they were, so what? The question is, why do these people have as much power as they had and they've always had? When we talk about people like the Vatican, they've essentially been in power for 2,000 years. Nobody's ever tried to go against him directly. I mean, Napoleon, some people could say Napoleon did or whatnot, but for the most part, they've remained untouched. They've had, they basically allocate power out to Germany, to Britain, to the world, and nobody ever really gets upset at them. Nobody goes against them, even though they're, the smallest sovereign nation in the world. And it just kind of intrigued me for a very long time. Why do people bow and kiss these people's hand? They grovel at their knees. And it was always just such a mystery to me, because it's like, when you just take like the bankers, for example, let's just say, for the sake of the argument, that the bankers rule the world. And if that was true, and their model is essentially just corporate greed and profit, and there was nothing behind it, they would have took out the Vatican a long time ago, or even Europe for that matter. So it's not just about money, I mean, money is an expression of energy. And that energy is dictated or directed from somebody else other than even bankers for the most part. And I would say even it goes past the kings. There was a quote in this book that I have called The Vatican, where Pope Boniface in the 13th century said basically there's two types of swords in this world. There's the one that the priests wield, and then there's the one that the kings wield. And the king only wields the sword, meaning that he basically just has might because of the priest, because the priests allow him to have might. And so when you just see quotes like this, which are papal bulls, papal comments, they're not just nobodies making this stuff up. These are basically the higher ups of the Western world, if not the world as a whole, making these kinds of comments. It really stimulates the question, why is it that, these, apparently old, frail men in robes are running the entire world, And so, like I said, it's ironic because through an apparent unrelated series of subject matters, I came to the conclusion ultimately that it has to do something with magic, which we vaguely call prayer or meditation. And today it's being understood as the electromagnetic life force, which a lot of the 20th century and the 21st century scientists talk about. But it's essentially wielding through the conscious will the electromagnetic life force and manipulating the environment around you. And that's really what magic is. Now, the reason I came to this conclusion is because, again, I studied the Kundalini Yoga, which explicitly goes into detail about wielding certain magics, whether it's levitation, hypnosis, mesmerism, telekinesis, pyrokinesis. I mean, whatever you want to call it. And they go into explicit details how to develop these psychic powers. Now, they don't tell you that to develop the psychic powers. They propagate magic, as it were, because you're supposed to, the objective of yoga is phenomenal liberation, which means that you're supposed to become beyond this world and kind of surpass the dualities of the physical world. That's the objective. But the reason they mention magic is because that's kind of the last stage before you actually become enlightened or godlike. And that's why they mention magic to begin with. But again, it's interesting because as I'm reading, Kundalini Yoga and even Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and then I read Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, he talks about essentially that the individuals that understood the electromagnetic life force became the arbitrators or the kings of this world, which, bam, we go back to it again. In referring to kings and priests, basically being essentially magi, magi meaning a person who understands the magnetic force, the electromagnetic force, basically becomes the higher up or the spiritual, godlike arbitrator of this world. And I've seen this in Morals and Dogma. I've seen this in Kundalini Yoga and in the regular yogas. I've seen it in, Golden Dawn Magic. You see this in also the Kabbalah when you study the Tree of Life and the Sephiroth. Essentially, talk about the active and the passive principle. And, it's just over and over and over, you kind of notice these correlations. Even modern science talks about that, when you essentially concentrate, individuals who are more psychically prone have this natural ability to be able to concentrate, mentally concentrate a little bit more easier than other people who don't, which is essentially, again, that electromagnetic life force expressing itself in the outside world. So, I mean, without going into just absurd details about this kind of stuff, this is just, some of the revelations that I made over the years about this kind of stuff. And it's profoundly interesting because, I guess the synopsis of it is the people who, through obviously, conscious meditation, conscious reflection, and just having, pursuing the spiritual idea in general, after some time, they start refining themselves within themselves, and then they become, I guess if you want to call, for lack of a better term, magicians, but rather they control that electromagnetic life force within them, which really makes them the kings of this world and eventually godlike when they absolutely purify their bodies.
Okay, and then astrology has a lot to do with it, right?
Right.
I mean, okay, so it interested me for the longest of times, looking up at the night sky, appreciating the, the kind of potential that's out there. What are your thoughts on astrology? How come the gods, look to the sky, and how come it's so important? Let's get into astrology, if you will.
Well, the astrology, again, is a very interesting subject because, again, even religion, but even any legitimate spiritual tradition touches in on astrology, whether it's old or new. And essentially, they all say the same thing, which comes down to the fact that the stars, the constellations, the planets influence the Earth. Now, that doesn't mean that everything's predetermined or predictated. It just means that the stars can influence certain events, and as a result, they can influence humanity on Earth. Now, some people would say that's just, that's absolutely erroneous and not true. But, like I made that reference in the astrology video that, the moon, the sun and then the moon, what kind of an influence it has on us, an apparent influence, then naturally, the planets have a very potent influence on us as well. And I don't know, we were talking about Mercury retrograde earlier, that, in Mercury retrograde, for some reason, every time it happens, you are, 30-40% likelier to experience some kind of communication barrier, whether it be in a contract or, driving or riding a bike or walking. It just more mishaps tend to happen.
How often does this happen,
Mercury retrograde, I think, happens 3 times a year, and it changes all the time. For the listeners, they could just Google search Mercury retrograde, and it'll tell them from what dates to what dates and when it's most strongest and potent and when it kind of wanes. Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah. It's pretty interesting to know the dates this year. Have missed them all, or?
Well, I think actually we're in one right now, or it's coming up again. Just, Google search Mercury retrograde, and I'm sure actually I could do it while we're talking, and I can tell you what I find.
No doubt. And all our listeners know who they're tuned into. freedomslips.com. Come and join us down here in our chat room. We've got a wonderful guest in Joe Dolezal. And you can visit his website, thepyramidcenter.org, and look at some pretty cool info. Now, on that pyramidcenter.org, I haven't found those videos. They were more like on another site, the Pyramid Center / something else that had your videos on it. Where's your videos?
My videos are actually, I know they should be on my website, but they're not. But if you just YouTube search go to thepyramidcenter.org.
Okay.
And then type in KMED. So that's KMED. KMED.
Okay. KMED.
.html. And that'll take you to this Kundalini yoga page that I made just randomly about 2 weeks ago. And I have all the videos currently on the web posted right at the bottom. And you could even download free Kundalini meditation and stuff like that. I just, something I did on a fluke.
Yeah. Pretty interesting. Yeah. We can get into, to all that. Now, so.
And also, I also sent, I just sent you something for the listeners if they want to check out a full bio on the Pyramid Center and me. There's an extensive bio. It's not on the webpage. It's called thevibenow.blogspot.com. Or maybe I should just send you. Should I just send you the link?
Yeah. I got the link right here, and that's thevibenow.blogspot.com.
Yeah.
The zodiac. Okay, yeah. So astrology has a lot to do with the way I think the whole planet works. I mean, a lot of the pyramids, all the pyramids and their correlation with the night sky. What are your thoughts? Let's get into that.
Well, again, just like you mentioned, the pyramids definitely are aligned, like the Great Pyramids in Egypt are aligned with the constellation, constellation Dragonus, which is, and then it's also aligned with the Orion as well. and it has numerous amounts of alignments as the years progress. The whole concept of even religion is based on astrology, like, through the precession of the equinox. I don't know. Are you familiar with that term at all?
The equinox, I've definitely heard it, but I have not been well versed on it. Sorry.
Well, but the brunt of it is essentially, our solar system is in the Milky Way galaxy. Essentially to rotate around, we're basically, our solar system is rotating perpendicular to the Milky Way galaxy, even though we're in the Milky Way galaxy. And it rotates essentially an entire cycle in the perpendicular fashion in roughly 25,600, 400 years. So it's about a 25,000 year cycle. And through each of these cycles, that essentially our sun is relative to us on Earth. The sun actually goes behind certain constellations, and it goes through 12 of these constellations within the 25,000 years. This phenomenon that I just described is called the precession of the equinoxes. And for the sun to go through each cycle, or through each sign rather, through each sign, which there's 12 of them in the 25,000 years, it takes about 2,100 or 2,200 years to go through each of these signs. Now, the reason that's significant is because if you want to call them the sages or the magi's of the ancient yore, they noticed that when the sun would shift through certain constellations, it would have certain influences on the entire human race for that 2,000 period span, and then it would change again. So we see, that, now we're in the constellation, Pisces, essentially, which is
greed and envy and hatred and animosity. Oh, go on.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's one of the aspects, but Pisces is more like dreamy. It's kind of like a fantasy make-believe, which of course one of the aspects can be greed, anger, deceitfulness, but the other aspect of it is essentially kind of living a beautiful lie, if you will. And
beautiful.
and again, when you study how economics works and how money works and all that stuff, then we do live in a beautiful lie, or we have for a while. But exactly. So that's essentially one of the major influences of astrology, of course, that play a major role in religion today, even. But astrology in general is definitely, it does not predestined or determine everything about what you're going to do or even the human race is going to do, but it does severely influence it. The will, every religion will tell you that essentially the will has the ultimate say. Whatever you will do, whatever you have the might to will, then that ultimately has the final say. But if you're just kind of stagnant, then the stars will play a very significant role in your life.
Well, I think I'm pretty gung-ho on the things that I do, and I live it to the fullest, and I get what I put out there.
Right.
And, it's like that karma thing and all that good stuff. And you see it every day. You get what you put in. And I think it has a lot to do with, well, I'm not sure about the stars because I'm not well versed on it, but I think it has a lot to do with this whole concept of being here, and you have to sort of rise to the occasion and benefit spiritually and consciously to a higher level, aspire to be higher, because that's what our whole goal is. I mean, it's obviously not to get physically fit because here I am at 27 and I haven't done that, but my spiritual mind, I've definitely progressed, and by reading and by learning, there's got to be this kind of goal to life that is just more than what you see in the general public and the average Joe. You gotta, like you said, do your research and read up on these things.
Right, and and that's when I studied the Eastern traditions, and that's kind of what I deduced that karma was, because of course everybody has their definition of what they think karma is, and essentially it's a Sanskrit word which just means action or duty, which obviously not every action that you do can be considered karmic. So it's rather an action that you do as a result of a certain urge that you have. And that urge actually determines whether you're progressing spiritually or not, because if it's a harmful urge like, drinking or drugs or beating people up or whatever it may be versus helping people, then it's probably going to set you back spiritually than it is going to ascend you spiritually. And I tend to agree with you absolutely. Everybody, I think, that's born in this world has a destiny. And that destiny can be deduced somewhat through looking at your natal chart, your stars, because that will reveal what your strong points are and what your weak points are. Everybody has them. Everybody has very strong points. Everybody has very weak points. And that's like what we just talked about 20 minutes ago, that, you said I was intellectual. That is one of my strong points, sure, but I have weak points as well. And I think what it is, in order to karmically purify yourself or spiritually purify yourself in this lifetime, I think what you have to do is recognize your strong points and apply it towards your weak points to help humanity and to help, the human whole. Because that essentially, it takes the gold that you have and you kind of split it between everybody. And that in itself will purify the karmic urges that you've had in the past from whatever iniquities you might have done in whatever lifetime you might have done. And it definitely reaches you to a higher plane than just the conscious duality we currently live in.
Okay, great. I'm just going to give our chatters out there a little background. This is Joe Dolezal. He has as they call the Pyramid Center, located in San Bernardino, California. One of our chatters was wondering where it's about, where it is and what it's about and how much it costs to go to the Pyramid Center. And I know that we were talking about this and you were, what's the word I'm looking for here? You're not making money here. The word has lost me.
No, that's fine.
It's not about the money.
The center and it's right, nonprofit, yeah. I don't want to make any money off of it. Currently, we're still in the development phase, but even when it will be open and full blown, I'm not going to charge to get in it just because, I want everybody to have the access or the ability to access this place because I think it's very important. Right now, just to give your listeners a small background, when we acquired the land, then it was 230 acres, but it was out in the middle of nowhere with not even a road leading to there. So I myself have, invested quite a pretty penny over the last 5 years of developing it. And, what we have there to date, which you could actually see on the promo video that's on YouTube. Yep. We basically created roads. We created, I actually made a prototype bungalow, which of course the visitors and staff will stay in. And then a 1 kilowatt solar panel electric system. I've created some kind of walkways going through there. There's of course like a vortex tree, which I created a pathway walking there. And I've done a lot of this, foundational work, which is absolutely essential. And that's kind of where I'm at right now with all that, So people can always definitely, they can join, they can come up, help out, hang out. We stay out the night up there sometimes, but it's not up and running yet.
But let's appreciate the fact that it does cost money to operate these things. So, at the end of the day, somebody wants everything for free. Well, you're not going to get it anywhere across the board. And you're going to get ideas for free. You're going to do your own research for free.
Right.
When you want to use somebody else's amenities, you can't, overlook that. And it's not a question about making money because this whole project, I believe, and this is just my perspective, is about the people. It's not about yourself.
It is, right, absolutely. And, that's funny that you say that because I was just about to go into that's one of the hard lessons I've learned over the 5 years is that I was trying to do everything myself. And it seems that no matter how much money I threw into the project, and things just weren't either going as the way I planned them to or wanted them to or as fast as I wanted them to. And so now I'm actually kind of in a phase where I'm reaching out a lot more to anybody who wants to help in any way, shape, or form. And, like I was up there 2 or 3 weeks ago and I took up about 15 people with us and, we did just clean up. We hung out. I kind of showed everybody what's going on up there and walked through. And it was just a really good time. But, yeah, I can't do it alone because I've already tried. And then I came to that conclusion, too, that, this is a project for the people. So why am I trying to do it alone? And, in terms of it sustaining itself financially, there will always be that aspect of the necessity of maintaining itself financially, which I don't mind. I could accept donations or have a bookstore there and there could be some kind of profit bearing aspect to it so you can stay afloat financially.
That's what it's all about, yeah.
Yeah, but really what I want to do is, I would like to try, and this should be like a model example of what to potentially do if we were to go through, how a lot of people speculate apocalyptic doomsday stuff coming in, in the next 5, 10, or 20 years due to the economic crisis which is looming. So, again, this also being a spiritual community, I do want it to be self-sufficient in the respect that if something like that was to happen, we could kind of survive there with, adequate self-sufficient food, water, electricity, and basically everybody just living comfortable lives if everything was to, hit the fan, as it were. And because of that, I want that to be a model example. So when people come up there, they could say, hey, this is a great idea. What if I got, 50 of my friends or 100 of my friends and we bought, 100 acres out in Arizona or Nevada, and kind of replicated this thing. So again, it's truly multifarious in the respect that it's not just a spiritual center, but it ought to be a way of life through and through.
That's a very good way to put it. And I just want to let our listeners know, freedomslips.com is the website. Come down and join us here in our lovely chat room here. Revolution Radio, phenomenal E.T.s here every Thursday at 8 p.m., 5 p.m. Pacific. My guest this evening is Joe Dolezal, and you can find him at his website, thepyramidcenter.org. And I'll post, again, I keep posting your website here in our chat room, and we've got questions coming up in our chat room, and I greatly appreciate their help. And we will open the phone lines here if you guys want to grab your pens and paper and write down our call-in number here for the North American sector, 347-688-2902. That's 347-688-2902. Or as always, a free call on Skype. Type in Freedom Screen in your search box. Add us as a friend, and we will accept the request, and you can call in and speak with my guest, Joe Dolezal. And you have a partner in this, and it's unfortunate he couldn't be with us this evening. But unlike you said, you couldn't do this alone, and you have that partnership, which is great. And he brings a different aspect. I forgot his name. Jordan, is it?
Jordan Maxwell, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Jordan Maxwell as well included. Okay.
Oh, and there's a younger man that's helping me as well. Jordan, younger Jordan. I'm actually dealing with two Jordans right now.
Okay. And Jordan Maxwell, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. Maybe we can get into him a little bit later because he likes to deal with the numerology and symbolisms, and that has a lot to do with the Illuminati, I do believe, right?
Right. Well, sure it does. Well, the whole spiritual dynamic has a lot to do, and that's, again, the basis of their authority is really, magical, religious, and whatnot.
Okay. Can someone buy shares? Oh, we got a great chat room here. Saskatchewan here is posting for us. So how about this? We'll get into some of those questions here. Okay. So there is no cost at the moment to go up to the Pyramid Center.
Well, nothing. I mean, what I do is I intermittently go up there right now, and I go up there about once a month or twice a month, and you have to have a 4x4 to get up there because we are back on some dirt roads, so you need to have a 4x4 truck or SUV to get back to us, or you can just ride with us. I actually bought these little Suzuki Sidekicks that I put some bigger tires on, and I get out there with those because they're good, And so right now it doesn't cost anything at all. And again, even when it's open, it won't cost anything, but we probably will have like a donation aspect to it and maybe a bookstore and maybe like an organic cafe that could generate revenue for it to keep it afloat financially. But if I get my way through and through, I'm going to try not to charge for anything, especially in terms of admission, because that would be kind of defeating the purpose of what I'm trying to do. I truly do want to be accessible to everybody.
Exactly. Okay, great. And okay, so this whole basis is the Pyramid Center is because you are building a pyramid on the plateau there, correct?
Right.
Okay, so let's get into that here. What's the dimensions? What is it going to look like? I've seen the prototype of it. When is it going to be under construction? What is it going to be under construction with? Let's just go deep into it.
So, again, it's I've been the official dimensions that I'm going to use is 50 by 50 feet, the base of it, and the height of it. I'm actually planning on doing something like 33 feet, which should make the inner degree 52.2 degrees. And the reason I use that is because it's model scaled after the Great Pyramids in Egypt. What I'm going to have in terms of its structure is I really wanted to use a type of glass, a type of tempered glass for the actual side walls because I just think it would be very interesting to have the walls glass and essentially it would be hollow inside. And your underground, the way you would access the pyramid is actually to go underneath the ground and then you would escalate up a set of stairs which would pop up into the pyramid itself. The pyramid, again, it would be hollow, but there would be a 7-step apex leading to 1/3 the height of the pyramid, and this is where all the meditation and healing and experiments would take place. The capstone of it would be interchangeable because it's just my belief that the capstone is what really concentrates a lot of the energy from the etheric realm, or, if you want to call the ether or whatever it might be. It concentrates a lot of that electromagnetic force or that spiritual force, and then it allocates it down to the pyramid through the walls, but it all originates through the capstone. So I wanted the capstone to be interchangeable. We could have quartz, rose quartz, granite, if enough money comes through, do silver and gold, and really experiment with different types of energies, because it would be in like an antenna which essentially captures certain frequencies and then allocates it down to the subjects within the pyramid. So if you go to the Pyramid Center promo video on YouTube, you can actually watch the whole thing. Part of that video actually has the computer animated design, the 3D animation that we did for that, kind of going in and out of the pyramid, so you can really see a lot of details about how that's going to be when it's finished.
Okay, you were talking about the pyramid grabbing frequencies.
Right.
Pyramids have a special significance. I'm not sure about them, what the whole meaning of them is. I know that the Indians also use teepees, and it's kind of the same significance,
right?
Healing and a physical. Let's get into that. What are these significance here?
Well, the significance of the pyramid is multidimensional. The structure itself was built that way, according to a lot of research. The structure was built that way because it was believed that the pyramid, due to its capstone, it actually was kind of like a point singularity, if you will, from this side, the physical side, to the other side, which, if you want to call it non-manifest, or you want to call it the ether, or basically the other side, the spiritual side of the universe. And so that apex was essentially the point, or the nexus, that communicated between this world and that world. And so, as a result, like even in the Egyptian pyramids, they don't have capstones. All the capstones are missing. And as far as recorded history goes, they don't know what was there or who has it or if there was anything ever there, but they're all missing the capstones off all these pyramids. So it's my belief that these things were used as a type of, I want to call it like a pineal gland amplifier, or a spiritual amplifier, that the subjects going within these chambers and having the specific types of crystals or material located as the capstone of the pyramid, it would act as an amplifier essentially to any spiritual question that they might have. Kind of like, I don't know if you're familiar, this is a little off topic, but ayahuasca, which is that very, very potent hallucinogenic brew that a lot of the indigenous South and Central Americans use, and it essentially activates the pineal gland, and you can essentially get any.
I've heard of it. Yeah, let's get into it. It's not off topic. Let's get into it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. There's a book you can read on this subject. It's called The Cosmic Serpent, and I believe it was by Jeremy Narby who wrote the book. It was essentially a PhD thesis, a doctoral thesis that he wrote, and essentially he went down to the South America to live among the indigenous tribes, and while he was writing this report, he just kind of went off cue and he started experimenting with this ayahuasca because he noticed a lot of the elders and the shamans experimenting with it. And a lot of the tribe members, they would tell him stories about that this snake appears, like this snake, when you're on the stuff, you kind of, first you're nothing, and then all of a sudden when it hits you, this massive snake appears. And the hallucination is so real that a lot of people can go crazy from it. But if you maintain your psychological sanity, then you can ask this snake any question that you want, and it'll tell you. And what's crazy is that they're right almost 97% of the time, because his Jeremy Narby, the guy who wrote the thing, he actually wanted to know how the indigenous tribes knew how to make medicine from any kind of disease that you could acquire, poison or skin disease or mental disease, whatever it is that you had, they had a remedy for it, a natural remedy. And so he's thinking, how do you guys know? Essentially you're in very savage conditions, at least according to the Western standard. They're in savage conditions running around in their underwear, but they know more than a PhD doctor at Harvard. How's that happen? And he told him, he said, basically, drink this brew, First, you have to go through a fasting period. Then, of course, you have to be under the supervision of a shaman. And then when you're drinking the brew, then, be under supervision, and you're going to be pretty out there for about 8 hours. And when you see this snake, ask the snake what you want to know, and he'll tell you. He'll tell you what remedies to mix, what plants to mix, what to do exactly to come up with certain solutions or remedies, and they're right almost every single time. Now, incidentally, I don't know if you know this, but did you know that the pharmaceutical companies here in the United States got 80% of their patents for their medical supplements and supplements from here that they use, whatever it might be, like the pharmaceutical companies that use medicine to cure people, or not to cure people, but fix the symptoms of people. A lot of that they actually got from Central and South America. A lot of people don't know that. And so you essentially have this brew that when you drink and take it in accordance will disclose anything that you want. And what's interesting is when they started doing studies about it, they noticed that the brew would severely stimulate the pineal gland, which is essentially the third eye. And you would have access to any kind of knowledge because it appears that you're in direct contact with the source, if you want to call it that, or or whatever you might want to call your higher up, your superior spiritual guide. But you're in direct contact with him or her or it, and it'll disclose anything that you want to know about anything. And what's interesting is that the pineal gland has, in a lot of shapes, it looks kind of like a cat eye, really. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but it looks a lot like either a pine cone or like a cat eye or a reptilian eye, which is interesting because, that's where this whole concept of reptilians running the world, I don't know if you ever heard of that, but some people speculate that reptilians run the world, and it's kind of like yes and no, because when you stimulate the pineal gland, for whatever reason it is, the pineal gland has always been associated with the reptilian eye or with this reptile snake, which is ironic because it goes back to the reptiles running the world through the Vatican or whatnot. I don't necessarily abide by that theory, but, it's a pretty predominant theory in this field. So it's very interesting because back from the ayahuasca thing to the pyramid thing, you have the same idea that there was essentially the capstone of it, which was always some kind of an interchangeable piece, was really the nexus or the piece that acted as the intermediary between the subject inside, within the king's chamber, and the other side of the world, wherever that may be. And as a result, it essentially expounded any kind of spiritual knowledge that you would have or you would even want, which is where I think personally the ancient pyramids, or particularly the pyramids in Egypt, the 3 major pyramids on the Giza Plateau, originated from, because they definitely didn't come from any modern mechanical standards that we would understand today, because they've even tried to replicate them and they can't do it.
Oh, that's been the forever battle, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it definitely didn't come from that because it wouldn't even make sense for it to come from that. The whole concept of, slaves drudging it up. And even when you hear these people talking about these theories, they don't even make sense, because then they say, well, how did you get the capstone up there if it was done in this fashion? And they can never answer because they say, they pushed it up pulleys, 200,000 slaves. And it just, from the beginning to the end, there's so many loopholes, and logic alone would tell you if the biggest crane today can pick up something like 20 tons. How did they get those 50 or 100-ton blocks up there,
That brings in the E.T.s.
The E.T.s, or what I think personally, and this is what a lot of scriptures say. I mean, I believe that there are extraterrestrials, maybe even among us. But then you have to ask yourself, what is extraterrestrial? Because I'm not even sure that human race is really indigenous to this planet when you think about it.
Yeah, very good point.
Because look at us. I mean, we can't really live according to nature, and we're the only thing, you get a dog, an animal, a deer, a bird, and, you throw them out there and they could pretty much survive. Most people, if you threw them out into the wilderness, I would say 99% of them would just die out. That's kind of like what Navy SEALs go through and why they're so notorious survivors. So living with nature as such almost seems like a foreign concept to the human race, and there's just, again, a lot of loopholes, a lot of, why is it that all of a sudden there was, Neanderthal, and then, how many hundreds and tens of thousands of years there were nothing, and then all of a sudden ancient Sumeria pops up. Well, what happened between then, but I personally think what a lot of these structures were, I think that my personal theory is that we as a human race were something much, much more civilized and advanced 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, and we've categorically degenerated into what we are today. That's what I think. So when we talk about, even the ancient pyramids, there might have simply even been different types of races. Today we have the 5 races or the 4 races, depending on whose theory you go by. You have the blacks, the whites, the Asians and the whatnot. But there might have been several different races that might have just killed each other off. I mean, look how good of a job we're doing today at killing each other. So it might have just been more advanced, and there might have been different type of species here, different type of human beings, different type of races, and I think maybe they worked as a collective whole to develop these things, kind of like what Atlantis was,
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of signs across the planet, such as Atlantis, and such as
right.
all these signs, and Easter Island being one of them.
Right.
A very huge one. And, I mean, all these questions that do not get really answered. I mean, they're in our history books. I mean, you just got to look at them. They play those Ancient Alien,
right.
TV series and what have you. I mean, what is the purpose of, just telling us a little bit about them, but not really exploring the whole venue of it on a wide scale, because then that would lead us to our ancestry and really
right.
give us an outlook of what, we're capable of. Like, we're only using, 3% of our brain?
Yeah, 5 or 11 at best, which might even be a lie.
Well, then I'm using 3. Go ahead.
I'm using 2.5. So.
Cool.
No, one of the biggest thing that irks me about the ancient extraterrestrial ET thing is, I watched a video, and this was actually in the documentary Moon Rising by Jose Escamilla.
Oh, yes, watch it. I love it. I love it. I push it here all the time.
and where that astrophysicist lady, she's the Indian lady. Her name's Stella something. I can't think of it offhand, but she basically does a small little interview in there. And she talks about how she used to work under the wing of Wernher von Braun, the late Wernher von Braun, who was, for your listeners, he was essentially the main scientist for the Nazi regime that then later escaped, and is actually the reason we even have NASA, or even a rocket program, or even a lot of the space equipment that we have, because that was pretty much direct Nazi Bell technology that after the Nazi regime fell, then America kind of scooped it up and then took off from there. But the reason I'm mentioning that is because when she, I think it was in the late 60s or late mid 70s, she worked under the wing of Wernher von Braun, and he was close to passing away. He was heavily, he had a lot of infirmities with cancer because he was working with a lot of crazy, lasers and electromagnetic technology that gave him cancer later, is what he died from. And he pulled her aside, and he said specifically, he said, you know what, I'm going to tell you something, talking to Stella when she was in her 20s working under his wing. He said, you know what, I'm going to tell you something. He's like, there's going to be 3 major phases in the world. There's going to be communism. The whole world's going to be afraid of communism, and communists are the threats, and they're bad people, and they're going to come after you, and the whole world's got to fight communism. The second phase is going to be terrorism. He's saying this in the 1960s, 1970s, long before even terrorism was known to anybody. He's saying the second stage is going to be terrorism. The whole world's going to be afraid of terrorists. They're going to come out of the Middle East. They're going to be, it's probably going to be the Islamic nation versus the world. And then he says the last thing that they're going to do, and we'll get to who they are in a second, is that they're going to make us believe that there's extraterrestrials out there, that we as a human race are actually being attacked by extraterrestrials. And she's kind of looking at him dumbfounded, because this is Wernher von Braun. It's not some random bum off the street. This is a super high profile person who knew Adolf Hitler personally, who knew, the President of the United States personally. This is a very high profile scientist saying these things to her and repeating them in many cases. And so she asks, well, what's the purpose of this? And he says the purpose is to unite the world under a one world order. You want to call it the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, but that's the objective. It's basically playing off of these ideas that, first it's them versus us and then we win, and then it's them versus us and then we win. So the first communism thing was really about consolidating the Western world, which is what they did with communism, right? Because it was Western Europe versus Eastern Europe, which was, Russia. And then, we won, quote unquote. And now the second phase, which is terrorism, is, the Western world going against the Islamic extremists, so that's what it is. And then after that's done and said, and that's why they're going after Libya and Iraq and all this stuff, then the last and third phase is going to be about us being attacked by extraterrestrials. And when she asked what was the purpose again, it was to unite the whole world. And he looks at her and he says, you know what, all of it is fake. all of it, from the communism to the terrorism to the E.T.s, all of it's going to be fake. Now, you're going to really see spacecrafts. I mean, you'll see super high-end military operations that we don't know even exist. That you will see that, and then things like Project Bluebeam, spacecrafts like you mentioned earlier, going into caves that can apparently manifest and remanifest somewhere else, because what they're doing is they're tapping into the quantum field. So it's very real technology, but it's people either within our own government or a completely separate shadow government that nobody knows about, because it's not disclosed, essentially, that do their own thing. And they've had this technology at least for 100 years. I mean, I studied physics and math, and it's just crazy because they teach you 300-year-old classic Newtonian physics, which has been obsolete for at least 150 years, and they'll teach you that stuff. They essentially teach us that what they knew is basically, the epitome of any kind of math or physics that you learn is going to be 1930s quantum mechanics. And then it's as if everything stopped after that and no more science or mathematical progression happened. Well, it's interesting because when you read this kind of stuff, what happens in the 1930s is essentially the whole concept of quantum teleportation, quantum magnetism, quantum, everything, the whole physics of quantum really became to be. And, that whole debate of the search for the everything theory between Einstein and the Nazis, that's what a lot of it was about, because whoever figured that out would essentially control the world. You can get objects to reappear over here and manifest over there. Project Philadelphia, where people just came up missing, some came up, it literally dissolves atoms and restructures them. That's you're basically kind of like the god at that point. You can dictate what's going to come into manifest and what's not going to come into manifest. Again, back to your initial question, the reason I'm so skeptical, and I do believe, obviously, there has to be so much more extraterrestrial life out there that we could ever even imagine, and maybe even on this own planet. But when we start seeing the whole E.T. things, they're propagating it big time in Hollywood right now with, like Battle LA and Skyline and Paul and, Cowboys vs. Aliens. It's so apparently obvious what they're doing, that I just don't buy it. Anything that comes out through mass media or even leaked, quote unquote, and we see extraterrestrials, I just don't buy it, because that's what the intention is. They're just going to inculcate people with it for 5 to 10, 20 years so the generation gets comfortable, and then they're going to actually start doing it. It's insane how these things work, but they do work, and that's the reason I'm so skeptical about E.T.s as such, because I personally believe that it's going to be a lot of our government happening. Now, that's not to deduce that I don't think that we ourselves as a human race aren't extraterrestrial, because I do believe it, and I believe that there has to be tremendous amounts of extraterrestrial life out there. But, this whole attack on the human race from the extraterrestrials, to me, is just kind of, again, it's like shaking your head in the corner saying, damn, how does nobody see what's happening? It's just like with terrorism, blatantly obvious that was people in our own government, and there's people to this day that just don't believe it,
Yeah, well, it's what you want to do with the reality of it all, and at the end of the day, if you want to, you have to. What is it? You have to be on your knees to have your head in the sand.
Right.
You have to get you have to get to that point, and if we just stand up as a mass and say we're not going to take it anymore, we want truth. And stuff like this. I mean, the Blue Beam Project and this fake alien invasion, we've heard about it before, and they know that we know, and it's just a whole big game with some of the things that you see in the sky, people calling UFOs. It's laughable, and you know what? It's great because they're looking up, but you know what? Sometimes they're seeing what they want us to see, and you have to really be do your homework and be discerning when you're looking up at the sky. And I've seen so many encounters that I know what I'm seeing, and I know we could have that technology as well. Be it Project Bluebeam, a great example, and they've tested that out several times. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and the technology that they have versus what they will teach you in public schools are two completely different worlds. I know from personal experience, they have technologies that quantum teleportation has been very possible for at least 70 years. I know that they have technologies like they're called electromagnetic guns. I've read articles and personal research of mine that can literally put people to sleep. It's like a type of gun which emits an electromagnetic radiation, and it will put you to sleep literally in a fraction of a second. It'll just knock you out, but you won't even feel anything. And on the same note, like Project Bluebeam, it could actually put quote unquote inspirational thoughts into your mind where you think you're actually communicating with the divine or whatever it may be, but you're just getting an electromagnetic message, which is being literally sent like a cellular phone message into your brain. And they said they've even experienced that. Some people have came out and experienced this. So yeah, I mean, you know what it comes down to without the whole fear mongering and this and that, because I personally don't care. I mean, I know that our government is so much more advanced that we'll ever know. And I believe that what they release to the public is at least 100 years, behind what they already know. But, that being what it is what it is. They'll never admit it. They'll never give you the technology. So to me, the best alternative route to do to people is educate them intellectually about their relationship to the government so they can at least to some extent extricate themselves out of the virtual slavery, and then educate themselves spiritually, which would, I think, kind of completely liberate themselves from the relationship of the government, but also, liberate their own personal soul and fulfill their own karmic mission. And I think that's what it comes down to. The government, it is what it is. They've always been criminals. It's always been organized mob from the days of Caesar up until now. It is what it is. You can't ask the same people who enslave you to give you salvation, because it's not going to happen.
All right, and with that, we will take a station ID. Joe, if you'd like to wet your whistle there.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, it makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers.
That's right, you've got to put your body upon the gears, upon the wheels, upon the levers. You're tired of sitting in your recliner wondering if the talk radio that you're listening to is actually presenting you with facts or propaganda to manipulate the masses. How do you do this? It's too expensive. I could never get on air. I'm not a DJ. Well, now all that is possible at TotalTruthRadio.com. That's right, for $50 a month. I repeat, just $50 a month. You can be the proud owner of your own radio station that is on air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, presenting facts that you research, things that you can prove, things that are close to your heart. Stand up against the machine. The more of us that stand up, the more of us that express our voice, the more of us that hear the truth, and that's the goal. We know that there are things going on in this world that are just killing the masses. They're dumbing down the populations. They're controlling the sheep, and you're tired of it, yet you just sit in your lazy chair and you listen, and you listen, and you listen, and you get more frustrated. The reason you're frustrated is because you're only listening. Start speaking. Get up out of that easy chair right now. TotalTruthRadio.com is selling affiliate radio stations for as little as $50 a month. That's right, $50 a month. And this just isn't the radio station. It is also the technical support that you need to get the station up and going. You have no computer skills. You don't need it. Go to TotalTruthRadio.com and look for full details. We started with 50 spots available. We are down to 44. These will go quickly. At $50 a month, a one-time fundraiser would pay your costs. So there's no reason to sit there looking at your bank book and saying, I can't do this. $50. You're on air when you want to be on air. You're saying what you want to say. You're able to do and present what you see as truth, what you see as being important. So get up out of that chair right now. Go to TotalTruthRadio.com, where you're going to find an awesome opportunity, and you're going to be able to stand against the machine that is manipulating us all.
And you've got to make it stop, and you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
We are awake. We will not be deterred. We shall find the truth. Politics, New World Order, weather control, the systematic destruction of humanity is in progress, and we are preparing to stand tall, and we attempt to awake others. Please note, we are listener-supported, so click a banner, make a donation. I do not have sponsors or commercials to support my efforts. Now, stand by. You are being connected.
You are about to embark upon a fascinating adventure into well-being, a journey which will leave you with a lifetime method for gaining unequaled health of body and mind and the sense of a new life.
Everybody makes their own fun. If you don't make it yourself, it ain't fun, it's entertainment.
And we are back here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Phenomenal E.T.s. I am your host, Tim Dalger, and my guest this evening, Joe Dolezal. You can find him at his website, thepyramidcenter.org. And we were just going back and forth here, figuring out where to go with this, because to be honest, there's never enough time there's never enough time in the 2-hour slot that we have here, and especially someone as well versed as my guest Joe here, that we can go anywhere with this. And so how about this? I'll throw you out something here. The rising of our conscience and spirituality is not exactly the fad, amongst general population. Mm-hmm. What's the reception been in your project? How have people taken to it?
Ironically, very well. And the reason I say that is because when I started the project, when I officially went public with it, and I opened it up for people to come and help me out in any way that they can 5 years ago, the general response was there was some people that were absolutely awesome, cool, revolutionary, and the majority of people were sketchy. They thought it was either a cult or some kind of, you get it. You unfortunately get it these times, and it's just like with those people, they're on their own thing. I don't even argue with them anymore. But a lot of people were just indifferent, sketchy, or kind of just like, they gave the negative brow towards it. But over time, and especially in the last 2-3 years, exactly as I predicted, because I kind of knew what was going to happen with the economy, people would naturally start seeking something a little bit more substantial within themselves as a result of the economic deprivation that's happening right now and will continue to happen. It's unfortunate, but because of the way the economy works and, the Federal Reserve printing out money and then attaching a debt to it, there can be no other option but to get worse. Unfortunately, economically, it's either going to stabilize or get worse, but it'll never get better. It just won't, because the way the economy is set up in the United States, it can't get better. So because of that, you see a substantial increase in individuals looking for something more substantial within themselves, meaning spiritual consciousness, through whatever means or modes is available to them. So like today, for example, versus 5 years ago, I have, when I do a shout out, I have thousands of people on my emailing list that have just signed up actually within the last year that want to be part of the project, or they just want to come to an event. When we have a gathering, a lot of people just want to come out and help, which is, super cool. I mean, it's just interesting when I see small stuff like that, how many people want to be part of something different, because I just, for example, when I went up there 2-3 weeks ago, I had just made a small little post email blast that I was going in 2 days up to the project. If anybody wants to give me a helping hand and clean up some of the just, weed abatement and just this kind of stuff, shrubs and just general. It was nothing major, but
yeah, it gets your friends out. You get to find out who your real friends are.
Right. Right. But ironically, I actually had more people wanting to go than I could actually get up there, because again, I have these little Suzuki Samurais that I take up there. They're these little 4x4 cars. I think they're excellent personally, but we had about 2 of them plus another truck follow us. And so altogether, there was about 12 of us that went that day, and I actually had to turn away like 5-6 people, and that was just from one email blast, So it just goes to show that there's a lot more people showing interest in this kind of a project and in the whole conscious awakeness thing. than you would even initially anticipate. And I think a result of it is just an utter dissatisfaction with the way things are going in quote unquote, normal traditional life, with the economy, with the social aspect of, the social degeneration, the political correctness, the cameras, I mean, anybody in their right mind would just be absolutely disgusted with the way things are going. And as a result, it's only good for me because I see a lot more heads turning towards alternative knowledge and alternative ways of life.
Yeah, and I think we have the internet to definitely
us.
help us, and we have
The internet is definitely a blessing and a curse. I think the internet is a phenomenal tool. I mean, it truly is amazing when you study your history and just kind of step back and see what the internet has done for the human culture in the last 10 years alone. But at the same token, there's no such thing as a benefit without an obligation. And you have to understand that the internet is a Department of Defense operation from the day of its inception. Google, Yahoo, all the back-end servers, Windows XP, Microsoft essentially being funded by the Department of Defense. It is a Department of Defense operation which is designed to basically take statistics off of people, their reactions, emotions, and be able to determine, actually through very profound and substantial algorithms, how the human race is going to react to certain events. So, keep that in mind. And, but the internet is a profound tool for information, very profound tool for information. And, I always think it's so funny that people today have more knowledge at their fingertips than ever, but they seem like they're not getting any smarter. So I'm always a little bit discouraged about that, but I figure maybe it's just going through a phase,
But we know it's because of what they're putting in our bottles, and we know it's because the TV, and we got to get off our butts and start getting back down to nature, start planting some trees,
and stay away from wireless things if you can. I actually just read a book not too long ago called The Body Electric. Your readers can find this on Amazon. It's only for like $12. It's called The Body Electric. And it was a book which was published in 1985, if I'm not mistaken. And it has an entire chapter devoted towards the back of the book about the electromagnetic radiation from, cell phones or cordless phones or even any kind of wireless device and what kind of an effect it has on your body. And it is really bad, actually. Your body releases a tremendous amount of adrenaline when you're next to any wirelessly emitting machines, and your body can't register it, which is weird because, when you have adrenaline, it actually, releases certain testosterone, and it's a very big wear and tear on your body internally when you release adrenaline because you're kind of like in fight or flight. And for whatever reason, electromagnetic radiation naturally releases the adrenaline within your body without your mind or body being able to pick it up. So if you ever sat in front of a computer for 3 or 4 hours and you feel super exhausted, which I'm sure some people have, I'm particularly sensitive to it. That's why, that's why if you've ever sat in front of a wireless computer or laptop and you come away walking super tired from it like 3 or 4 hours later, that's actually why. So yeah, stay away from wireless technology as much as possible.
As you're saying that, I'm trying to put my phone as far away from me as possible where I can see if I do get a call.
Right. Yeah, try to keep it like a hand's distance away, but for your listeners, it's called The Body Electric, and you could order it. There might even be a free PDF document I'm sure you could download at this point online, and it's the last 2 chapters that deal with electromagnetic radiation and, the hindrances on biological organisms, the mind and the body. So it's pretty intense stuff,
Yeah, I've got the wireless router here, and I guess it's embedded in the modem. So I got that constantly going, and so I don't think I'm doing too good. And I also got the smart meter.
Oh no, those are
they're horrid, man.
Yeah, those smart.
Go on.
You'd be better off investing, a couple of $1,000 into your own solar panel system and getting rid of those things, because those things I think emit radiation for up to 2.5 miles. So that's got to be a pretty powerful burst of energy.
Tell me, is solar panels really legit? I mean, what kind? I mean, my roof is 50 feet by about 15. So if I were to put them on the sun side, I'd get that much space. I know solar panels are expensive, but can that run the house now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I have a 1 kilowatt system currently juicing my trailer up in the San Bernardino Mountains over at the Pyramid Center, and all it is 6 panels screwed together. Each panel is 2 by 4 feet, and that's 6 of those screwed together. So, and It's relatively small, and that's actually producing 1 kilowatt of juice an hour, which isn't a tremendous amount. So for all the electricians out there, don't get excited. I know it's not a tremendous amount, but if you had, 50 square feet, or how much did you say, a 50-foot roof?
Yeah, 50 foot by 15, and I've got two sides, but the sun is really only on the...
That's more than enough. If you were to take some of the higher efficiency, because they have different grades of solar panel, don't forget. They have, kind of like the bottom of the barrel stuff, which you can buy at like Harbor Freight and stuff like that. But if you don't mind spending a little bit of money, you can get, easily a 300-watt system or a 300-watt panel in one panel, because they're starting to make them a lot more efficient. And if you get... if you get 10 of those and have a 3 kilowatt system, and if you're living by yourself with a sufficient battery bank, because you have to have energy to store, like the battery banks to store them as well.
Yep.
Because if you just have, a 20 kilowatt system and you have zero reserve, then you pretty much kick yourself in the butt, because you have to have a pretty good battery reserve to hold all the stuff. And then you have to, of course, calculate how much energy you use. But they are, the only downfall is they are a little pricey, but when you take into consideration like the health effects from smart meters, and you take into consideration how much, the fact that you're off the grid, and they're not monitoring you, and it's free electricity, and you know how it works, and you're off the grid if anything was to ever happen, because, they're starting to talk about, regulating people's power consumption, irrespective of if you have money or not. It's just, it's a win-win situation. I honestly think if you don't mind getting your hands dirty a little bit and maybe finding somebody that'll help you set it up, you can buy a very, very good system for $10,000, $15,000, but a very good one that, of course, will last you your whole life. So when you think, $15,000, you can buy yourself a crappy car, which most people will, versus something that'll last you for your whole life, and it is an essential, then it really isn't that much money. Even if you take out a loan and pay it over, a couple of years, it's literally nothing. So,
well, considering right now I'm paying an average of about $200, give or take, on an annual basis a month. So that's, $2,400 a month. And,
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right there, right there. So even if you were just to pay $2,400 a year, so let's just say that's $2,500, you essentially would have this thing paid off in 5 to 6 years, paid off, and then you own it. For the rest of your life, it would work. You would know how your electricity works. So it's like, is that really such a burden, compared to the other essentials out there? Not to mention, smart meters. I mean, I've only read very bad things about those smart meters. I hate to scare people. But.
Yeah, no, there's a whole bunch of information on the sites, and I've called our Hydro One or what have you, and I've called the government, and I've talked to the right departments, and they've said no, they're being installed. We're getting off the digital way of doing it, and
the analog, right? There's the analog with the wires, right?
Okay, well, right now they're doing it all wirelessly, because they can come up and they just put that machine right to your thing, and I guess it makes their job easier. But they've done all those videos, and you could see it. It's just unhealthy, and it's like to the point where when our people are just going to say we've had enough of it, and I hate seeing the 1 out of every 100 person being awake. It's really sickening. You know what I mean? It's like we can't get over this, and it makes it really, they make life really easy. If you just keep your head down, do what you got to do, pay your taxes, we'll make life easy for you. And we're going to raise your prices across the board, give you no money to progress in life, and just the essentials, and keep your head down, and you'll have a good life. And that's what I've noticed. My parents, my mother's saying the same thing, and just keep your head down, you'll be all right. And what's the point of that?
Right. Exactly. And I just have an internal tendency to completely disagree with, that whole submit yourself, because, it's just completely fear-based. It breaks the spirit. You're essentially a slave from the cradle to the grave. And none of it's true. It is not more of a convenience to live in the society they provide. It's not more of a convenience at all, because, first of all, how many people have actually tried to live in small communes where they were self-sufficient? I can guarantee you none of them. The second thing is, it's just when you think that you actually will spend your entire life working just to sustain your existence, not to actually enjoy any luxury or even, pursue anything spiritual, but you essentially slave your whole life away just to maintain your existence. How is that easy? Logic alone would tell you that that's worse, because that's essentially just efficient savagery. You can be out in the wilderness and fight your whole way just to exist. But, people do it in societies because of they're afraid and because they get sidetracked, with money and dollar amounts. So people don't know how much things are worth, like how much food is actually worth, how much electricity is actually worth, how much housing is worth. I actually thought of something very funny is houses. I've actually remodeled houses before from scratch. And just to give you an example, my trailer that I built up there, it cost me, and it's not anything profound. It's essentially the shell from a construction trailer. So, I don't know if you know the construction trailers, they're a little bit bigger than your average trailer. It's just the shell of it. I completely renovated that thing, and I spent $8,000 on it. And I put double pane vinyl windows in there, which is like the best insulated windows that currently exist. I put steel doors in there, tile. I put like Spanish tile. I used mosaic bathtub. I had a marble countertop. I mean, I went all out on this thing. And
I've seen that.
Yeah, and the inside of that is much more luxurious than 95% of people's houses. I've rebuilt houses. These little crap shacks we have here in California that are worth like $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. I would say, depending, if they were brand new and me, my dad, my brother, and another guy were to build these things from scratch, they're probably worth $30,000, $40,000 brand new. So
yeah.
It's like, there's something going on where you're paying big time for nothing. Because if these houses, I've built houses, so I know what they're actually worth. And that's if you go to Home Depot and buy your material at retail. I'm not even saying if you get a wholesale connection or even if you manufacture your own material. But when you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for something that isn't worth a fraction of that, what's going on? Why are we paying that much? Who's getting this money? Why are we paying that much money?
Because that's the norm. That's the norm. That's the easy thing to do when you got a mortgage and the bank takes care of it. They want assets. They want to see that's exactly
the point that I'm trying to make, is that it's not easier. Because if you have to work 30 years of your life just to quote unquote own something that's worth maybe 1 year of work, is that really easier? And of course it isn't. You can build those, I've remodeled 5,000 square foot homes in Florida, and I could tell you that just takes one good summer of hard labor with your family, and you can completely renovate and construct 5,000 square foot homes. So is it really worth 30 years of backbreaking slave labor just to own a deed to a house that you don't even legally own? You're just the exclusive leaser, as it were, because the state can always come in and seize it under eminent domain. So, is 30 years of slave labor really worth a crap shack that you can build in one summer? Of course it isn't. People are just lying to themselves because the truth is too hard to admit. That's what's really going on.
Great. Very good. Very good. We do have a question come from our chat room here at freedomslips.com. Looks pretty long and interesting here from Tremjar. Greatly appreciate it. Once we legally renounce our corporate identity and reclaim our sovereign right to exist, even if doing as of said corporation, as I guess, a corporation that has same name as us, and take ourselves out of legal maritime law and claim jurisdiction of common law, how do we continue to exist in this number of the beast society? It's a good point. Very good point. Like, how do we get off the grid totally, and just live like that from start to finish?
Yeah, the unfortunate, this is my answer from what the research that I have done, and I'm by no means I'm not an expert on the UCC sovereignty stuff, but I've been in the fortunate company of a number of people who have profound knowledge in the subject. So what I pretty much gather from it is that once you extricate yourself out of the United States corporation and you're no longer a citizen, you renounce your Social Security, you get title, you get the original birth certificate back in your hands, not the copy, but the original birth certificate in your hands, and you essentially renounce the state, becoming your own independent sovereign entity, then you can no longer do business with the United States as such, which means that you're pretty much limited to what you can actually do. You can no longer really, legally, you shouldn't be able to accept Federal Reserve notes or accept or give them out, meaning that you can't buy or sell stuff. But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be able to get certain parts of land, and as long as you stayed within that land and not really reached outside of those parameters, kind of like Indian reservations, then you should technically have something equivalent to like a sovereign principality, like Indian reservations. Or there's also certain religious corporations. I think even Utah, some sections of Utah are actually out of the jurisdictions of the United States. So, the short answer is you can do it. It is possible, but you're pretty much going to have to be restricted to a small community or a network of communities that's extricated itself out of the U.S. corporation. And be careful not to do business with U.S. citizens, because then you're essentially creating a federal crime by exchanging certain notes, which you shouldn't have the privilege of doing when you extricate yourself out of the United States corporate system. So unless you plan on moving to a jungle or not interacting with people or doing a community, something kind of like what we're doing over at the Pyramid Center, I would say play with it in theory. But, once you get your Social Security out of the system, try to get a job. A lot of people, they won't even talk to you,
That's a very good point. And self-sustaining communities is something that has really been on a lot of people's plates, and it's an idealism. It's a fun way of thinking. Like you said, we're in the dreamy part of the constellation. You were saying before, maybe it's all a dream. Maybe it's all just hopes and wishes. And I mean, because what we're really saying is we're tired of the system that we have in place. Money is going out left, right, and center, offshore, and we don't know. It's all going to debt, and we don't have a say. And at the end of the day, all we want is peace, and we want to keep the money we earn and being able to provide for people, because we're warm-hearted people and we care about each other. And when we have a government saying, well, we need to turn your lights on and we need to sweep your streets and we need to teach your children what we want them to learn, this is how much it costs you. And it's ridiculous. I've seen that land taxes that we pay here. It's through the roof. It's incredible. And I don't even have a light on my street. They don't sweep my streets. They don't do nothing.
Right. Well, I know, I'm paying a property tax up at the center, and I went into in front of the commission down in San Bernardino several times saying, why am I paying property tax? If I'm on a 15-mile dirt road and pretty much nobody can reach me, like unless you're ballsy and you have a 4x4, you're not going to get back there, So
it's 15-mile dirt road, eh?
It's a 15-mile dirt road back to our property, and pretty much only helicopters can make it there, and then 4x4 vehicles. No schools, no public transportation. I have personal letters from the fire department saying they won't go back there if a fire ever happens. And when I stand in front of the commission, I say, why am I paying taxes for a public service that I will never receive? They just look at you and strut your shoulders. That's it. They just strut their shoulders. They say, tough, deal with it. So exactly, on the one hand, it is kind of dreamy and idealistic to talk about, things like the Pyramid Center, self-sufficient communities. But on the other hand, what's going on with the world situation and then these absolute mob-ridden government officials, which are just crazy criminals in my perspective. They are criminals. They're gangsters. They don't care. You tell them, you tell the Dom that, the other guy whacked your family, and he just struts his shoulders and say, what can I do? And that's what the government does. I can't pay my taxes. You're going to lose your house. They strut your shoulders and say, tough. A lot of people are hurting right now. So they don't help. They don't help at all. Yeah. And police don't help. They, how many crimes do they really prevent? They don't really prevent any crimes at all. They come after the fact and scare some people with some guns, and then they shoot.
They create the crimes.
They create the crimes. And exactly. Statistically, if you research it, most of the drugs, that are imported into this country are Black Ops CIA operations. That's been proven a number of times. So it's just like, people, I think, the biggest thing is that, these self-sufficient communities, I think, are going to be a thing of necessity, not necessarily of just idealism, because if you're half bright, if you have an IQ above mental retardation, I don't think you're going to be able to function, because the BS that just in general, what's going on with the government, all the way from economy to, local police to, statewide senators to the economy. Everything. It's just starting to really become disgusting, disgusting to put it nicely. Because everything, just the cameras and, the GMO food and the chemtrails that they constantly deny when it's blatantly obvious. And now they're coming out and saying, yes, we do modify the weather, but it's just like, exactly, it's just,
and the lies and all the lies and the NASA cover-ups and all the pictures, the moon rising and all the what in the world are they spraying and all these movies and Gasland. It's just incredible that you can sit there and take advantage of it and not do anything about it and not care. And when you're 50 years old, you get cancer, you get this, you get that, and you wonder, where did it come from? You never took the steps to follow. If you look in your deodorant, All you have to do is look.
Has aluminum in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So how about this? I just want to let the callers know the phone line's been open all night. Just if you guys want to call in, please do 347-688-2902, 347-688-2902, or as always, a free call on Skype. Type in Freedom Screen in the search box, add us as a friend, and we'll accept your request. And you can get in with Joe Dolezal of thepyramidcenter.org or myself, Tim Dolger, if you've got any questions. We're going for another 30 minutes still. So exactly, I mean, the system is engineered this way. I don't exactly know where I left off, but it's basically engineered the way they want it, and the ball is rolling because of us, and we can stop that ball at any time and just end up, saying this is not going to happen anymore, and we want answers, we want truth, and we want you guys to work for the people.
Right, and that just goes back to the initial comment, like you mentioned, that a lot of people say it's easier to live in the system with your head down. It's not easier. It's not. It's much more tedious and much more cumbersome to live in that kind of a system, because you're essentially a slave from A to Z, and you have no rights, you have no say. You have your opinion matters little to nothing. And so is that really easier than maybe struggling for a couple of years to create a self-sufficient community, but after the ball's rolling, producing food, just imagine if you built a house for literally a tenth of the price it would cost to buy one, but you built it to your spec, brand new, and then you never paid a mortgage. See, people are so far down the rabbit hole, they can't even imagine something which is an inherent right to them. It's not a privilege. It's not something somebody gives you. Housing should be an inherent right, but because people are so far down the rabbit hole, they just can't even imagine that they deserve something like that. And that's really the predominant problem here, is having people just kind of go over that initial hump. It's like when you're a drug addict, you always say, I can't. And then right when you take that first step, options just start opening up to you that you never even knew existed. And I think that's kind of what's happening here is, people are under a spell. They're like drug addicts. They don't see anything else, because to even make a comment like it's easier to just bend over backwards and let the system have its way with you, all the time, that's asinine. That obviously shows that a person's never bothered to think about anything from housing to minimum wage, to working wage, to retirement plans, to the food they put in their body, to the social conditions that they subject themselves to every day. It's just not true. None of it's true. That's what you can say in theory, but it's just not true. None of that is easy. On the opposite, it's much, much harder. The only thing that might give you the impression that it's easier is that you don't have to make a decision and be responsible for your action. But it's by no stretch easier or even beneficiary for anybody.
Yeah, very good. I just want to plug in here, if people want to join Lord of the Mystic here, he's one of our fellow hosts here. He has a website, blowupthenet.com. He's actually airing our show right now, and he is a member of our perfect and our wonderful station. I wouldn't say perfect because we're far from it, but in my eyes, it is the Total Truth Broadcasting Network, and he had purchased a radio station. So thanks for that, Lord, and he's plugging our radio station over there, so I greatly appreciate it, and that's at blowupthenet.com. And this evening, Joe, it's phenomenal E.T.s here, and I just wanted to let people know that when the lines are open, and we do have a caller that has come in. Rick is a fellow host here on Monday nights. How you doing, Rick?
Hey, I'm doing great. Great to hear from you guys.
Very good. What's on your mind tonight?
Oh, I'm just ecstatic that you've got a I'm sorry, what's the gentleman's name from the Pyramid Center on?
Joe.
Joe. Oh, okay, Joe. Okay, yeah, I just caught that, but I looked under the Pyramid Center yesterday when I saw what the show was going to be about, and I was really happy about that. And this has a lot to do with what I was telling everybody about. We need to get back to a sense of community. We need to figure things out on a smaller level for ourselves, because if we try to affect the changes that some guys are talking about, we're going up against a brick wall.
Yeah, you won't, I think any kind of a violent or forceful revolution, quote unquote, against the government, you won't win, because these people, they're anticipating it. They have technologies that far surpass anything most of our imaginations could even come across. And, they're just ruthless gangsters. They don't care, and they'll kill you. They'll say you're a terrorist, and they'll have the whole world supporting it. So to go against them face to face, fist to fist, first of all, you would lose, and second of all, it's stupid, because all you're doing is proliferating the same kind of degenerated fear mongering that they've done to the world the entire time. So I think it's really more about spiritual, intellectual enlightenment and helping one another. And like you mentioned, having a community-based operations where everybody provides everybody's needs, and we all help each other out. And the objective would be for spiritual purification or spiritual enlightenment through the intellectual endeavor.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I think that also what you said, we definitely have to get away from if we can do this and do it without raising enough eyebrows and get to where we can actually be a help to our community. I know that's actually what me and my wife are doing on a lot smaller scale, a considerably smaller scale. What we decided to do is focus on ourselves first. We decided to take care of our stuff first, make sure we have everything prepared, be prepper minded at least. Try to make sure we have all our P's and Q's in order, and make sure we can try to get some property away from any major municipality or even a big city.
Right. Well, one of the things about, even raising eyebrows is just kind of, no matter what kind of land you have, whether you have, just tens of acres or thousands of acres, it's going to have a certain cap to how many people it can support. But like I was mentioning to Tim earlier, it's not necessarily about hosting the entire world under your wing. It's rather showing people that want an option, that want an out of this drudgery, how they themselves could maybe just collect 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, or 100 of their, closest friends, relatives, or like-minded people and create self-sufficient modern communities where they don't have to be subject to virtual slavery their whole life. So it's not about, again, if we have something like what we were talking about with Tim earlier, and you get these people who, like we said, 30, 40 years, they work their whole lives to own a meager home that isn't worth, a tenth of what they paid for it, and then they don't even own it. And then you do an A/B comparison to something like what we've been talking about. Then the question is, how wouldn't anybody jump on that? Of course they would. So it's right now, it's to deal with the lack of faith people have in themselves. And it's like what I mentioned earlier, Tim. People been beat down so long, you can't even imagine to encompass, or rather to embrace, what ought to be yours by right, not by privilege, and that's a home, necessity, food, good food, electricity. Because we've been beat down by the system and taught that this is somehow a privilege, that, we should be grateful that we have a roof under our heads, even though we worked for it, 10 times over in a single lifetime.
That's a very good.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I can see that. Here. I was actually going to bring that point up that here in West Texas, I've actually found maybe 5 or 6 different communities where people are doing exactly what you're doing. And it's actually working out for them really well. Right. And now we've got people going up there and asking them for some of their organic food that they have, leftovers that they're going to start to get rid of at the end of the month, or some of their extra harvest, so we can actually have good food because there's none left.
Right. And I actually do the same thing with my milk. I go to private mom and pop shops and buy my milk there, because it does not exist to buy organic food in stores, because at best it's going to be pasteurized, but in its worst it's going to be pasteurized and radiated and watered down. So yeah, I actually go to the farms to get my own eggs and also to get my own milk, because I've lived in when I lived in the Czech Republic for a year. I forgot to mention that in 2008 I lived in the Czech Republic. Then I lived in a very small town of 109 people, and I about every other day rather, I went down the street, which is about a half mile away, to a lady. She was an older lady in her 70s, and she used to actually milk the cows right there. And I used to get the milk. It was still warm, and, you drink it in a day or 2 or 3. And for the first time in my life, I actually tasted what real organic milk was, and after that, it's hard to go back to the good, to the fake stuff you buy in the stores. Even if you go to Whole Foods or Henry's or any of these places, and you think you're buying organic milk, I can bet you anything you want it's not organic. Because I know now, so.
Yeah, that's true.
You can definitely tell the taste, can't you? And also, I remember looking when I lived in Mexico for some time with my wife. I remember looking at the eggs. That's one thing that really astounded me. When you look at the natural eggs, and then you look at what they sell us in the store, even what they claim to be organic, it's totally different, isn't it?
Yeah, it's completely. It's like drinking water and and whiskey. You know, I mean, it's completely two different breeds altogether, you know, because, you know, the FDA has such liberal requirements to what they can say is organic and what isn't, that pretty much anything that literally doesn't have arsenic in it can be called organic, you know. So because it's called organic, you know, people shouldn't even waste their money on that. What I tell people is they should eat the way they want to eat and then just take vitamin supplements unless they can actually afford to, you know, do their own farm and stuff like that. Because even the organic stuff that they buy at all these health food stores, you're just paying top dollar for mediocrity. Usually.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've got our own garden, and you know, and now it becomes a question of, are we getting good weather for our gardens? And you know what? I mean, this year has been horrible across the board. Either too much rain in some areas, too much drought in others, and it's just been horrible. We had 30 days without rain, so you know, I'm there every night, you know, watering. So it becomes a question of, you know, now we're working with our atmosphere and trying to work around that, and it becomes difficult. And they make it easy, right? You get to the grocery store and they've got everything right that you need, and they make it easy. And, you know, even when you get to the register, you know, swipe your card, put your card in the machine, punch in a couple numbers, and off you go. And you'll never see cash again, because that's what they're trying to bring in.
Right.
And, you know, get rid of cash, put these chips in your arms, and that's the future of it all. But, you know, and then I'm sitting behind the guy, and he's taking about 45 seconds to figure out the PIN number and to figure out he's chosen the wrong account. And
Is it really easier, right?
Yeah, is it really? So that's what I mean. So that's what the whole point is, you know, make this a little bit more difficult. So we say, well, hey, put the chip in there. We've already seen the commercials where the chips are beneficial if somebody gets into a car accident and can't speak, and you swipe the chip and you know, well, we can't give them this drug or this because they're allergic or what have you, the reactions. They make it sound easy, you know. They cause the problem, you got the reaction, then the solution is there.
Right, but again, you know, when we just refer to our logic, it's not easier, because even just like you mentioned with the credit card or the debit card, you know, you have the risk of identity theft, which is a huge problem that you would never experience if you had just strictly a cash-based society. And then, of course, you know, like you said, the PIN number, and then God forbid you forgot it, and then when it doesn't work, or then when you have you spend too much money and it doesn't work. Because I know I use credit cards a lot, and I can tell you that for the most part, there is certain conveniences and there isn't certain conveniences, but you know, there's no way I think you could logically argue that cash or credit cards are more convenient than cash. You know, the only thing some people could argue is that I don't want to carry around a lot of cash because I'm afraid of getting robbed. Well, okay, but how many times have you ever been robbed in your life? And for most people, the answer is never. So, you know, just arbitrary speculation isn't really a logical thing to argue. You know, it is, just like you said, you know, they pawn it off as a convenience, but you have to stop and ask yourself, you know, is it really a convenience? And of course it isn't. They just say it is, because it's just, you know, then you have to carry around a credit card. You have to worry about identity theft. You have to worry about companies overcharging you, which they do a lot. You know, you have to worry about, if you didn't overgo on the bill, you have to worry about that you have enough money to pay for something that you might not necessarily have enough money. And so now you're getting, you know, late fees and taxes and everything else. So it's like, all those problems are null by default with cash. So it isn't a convenience. Again, it's just like that propaganda. You know, if you tell somebody a lie 1,000 times, they'll start believing it's true. And it's just like, that's all it is. You know, credit cards are convenience. Credit cards are convenience. They just tell you so many times that eventually, like you mentioned earlier, you put your head down and say, yes, they are easier. When logic alone would tell you that they're not easier, they're not more convenient. You know, it's just like you said, it's an intermediary step to something much more sinister, which is the chip.
Yeah, that's
Joe, I have a question.
Shoot.
Pyramid Center, like I said, I was looking into it. I saw George Norris speaking about it. It looks like a fantastic idea, and I'm sure it's going to get rolling, because you can tell that it's more than an idea.
Right.
Like I said, we definitely need more things like that around. Everybody needs to get a sense of community and find exactly what they can do locally. Because this of trying to run up against walls and trying to go up against intelligence agencies and
you won't win.
Yeah, you won't win. That's what I'm trying to get to these guys. I kept telling them, I go, look, guys, we're not going to win. We're trying to go up against people that have intelligence companies for years. And then you said they've been beating us down not for one generation, for several generations. For several generations.
And it's across the board. You know, they've done it to Hispanic, black people through, introducing crack cocaine. That was all CIA stuff, to white people. I mean, it's across the board. Their victims are endless. They don't care. To them, it's just about unifying the whole world race. They don't care. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're absolutely correct when you bring things up like that. When you bring up stuff like the Freeway Ricky Ross situation, you bring up all the things that they've attacked us all in. They've attacked the Native Americans. Locally here where I live, they put up a dam that has no reverence on South Texas, and they ruined all of our history. If you look up the Lower Pecos Rock Art, the government intentionally ruined it and took the land of the Native Americans. I mean, it's horrendous. It's a land grab. They've turned us all into slaves. And if we get together and take care of each other, then there will be nothing left. Now, a question about the Pyramid Center. Let's say 5-10 years down the line. Let's say 10 years down the line, Pyramid Center up and running, ready to go. God forbid the system turns into what we see it's turning into now. How would the Pyramid Center? Yeah. How would the Pyramid Center deal with the people that are going to start to head out into the country and start to look for communities when the community is already full? Do you see what I'm saying?
Right, exactly. And that's what I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that every community, whether it's what I'm doing over at the Pyramid Center or any other community, they could at best only support, 10 or 100 or tops 1,000 people. And that's fine, because remember, these communities have to be small enough where there's no animosity created between people. In other words, you want everybody to kind of know everybody, to kind of embrace everybody, so there's no enemies as such. You don't want these massive mega metropolises. So again, the idea of the Pyramid Center would be just to create a model example. And of course, there are people living there, but you want to create a model example that when things do start getting worse, and they will, I believe they will, then people can come up there and they can say, oh, wow, look at this is what he's doing, and this is how he's doing it, and this is how they're getting their water, and this is how they're getting their power, and this is how they allocate out work to everybody, and this is how they share resources, and then this is what they do for entertainment. You see, once you have a functional model, copying it is easy. You can get, everybody understands it when it's in front of them. It's like computers. How many people actually know how a computer truly works at its, hecadecimal bit level? Nobody. How many actually know how an actual internal combustion engine works? Nobody. I mean, maybe 0.0001% of the population know how and why it actually works, but everybody uses it. And that's the whole thing about even a center, a concept like this, is the initial stages of it, to set up something like a sovereign principality where there is really even no exchange of like money or concepts or even interest, anything like that. Everybody just helps each other to kind of take a piece of the pie later, and everybody exclusively supports each other. Mimicking that isn't a hard thing to do. You can just get, a couple smart guys and girls to come up there and be like, okay, that's how he does that. That's how he does that. That's how he does that. Okay, let's move to Northern California or to Utah or to Montana, whatever it may be, and then we'll start our own thing, So that's how they can deal with that, or you could even go to, other countries. You don't even have to stay in the United States, but just to set up the first prototype is what is the big deal here,
Yeah, the first concept, yeah.
Right.
Well, the first modern concept of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Sir, I was going to ask you, Joe, are you familiar with Field Lab in West Texas by any chance?
The Field Lab in West Texas, what do they do exactly? There's a couple
It's just one gentleman out there. I'll get his name right now, but I saw a special run on him here locally, and what he does is he does the same thing, except he does it on a much smaller level. It's just him out there. And he's in, I think he's near Terlingua, Texas. And I think his name is John something or other. I'm looking for it right now. But the Field Lab actually does that. He's actually working on being self-sustaining. He's working on getting his own hydroponics lab out there to grow his own food, and he gets his own captures his own rainwater. He was using wind generators for energy, but he found out that the wind generators were actually not working, so he switched over to solar.
Yeah.
And if you have any problems with solar, he tells you, goes into depth about, taking care of solar and stuff like that.
Right, because wind power is pretty good, except for the fact that you have to be in a climate or an environment that supports that kind of energy producer. Because in some cases it's not the best. Like I imagine Texas actually wouldn't be the best. If you went to some place like the mountains where you have a lot of climate change, wind would be good. But solar is probably the best way to go right now. There's a lot of other stuff. If you want to get super creative, if you're next to like rivers, for example, or creeks that constantly turn, of course you could put turbines in there that would always produce electricity for you. And now they're starting to come out with hydrogen style cells, which are allegedly, you know, some of the people that I've spoke to, I've never witnessed it personally, but they talk about like these hydrogen cells that can produce substantial electricity for 15, 20 years, you know, in a single small cell because it deals with some kind of an atomic structure. Now, I don't know about that personally, but, you know, even something like exactly what this guy's doing, I'm looking at the website right now. You know, oh, it looks beautiful, actually. I love the desert. I'm looking at the pictures, but
it's
beautiful.
Definitely something to be into, you know. And he's got a live webcam out there. John does. It's a nice thing. It's something. I think he actually was from New York, if I'm not mistaken. I think he might have been a trader up in New York and got tired of it and said, you know what? I'm going to West Texas. I'm going to live off the grid. I'm getting rid of everything. I'm going to work off the land on my own and take care of myself. And there's a lot of people that are doing that. There's a couple out there. And they're living like as if it was 100 years ago, and they're living pleased as punch. Nobody messes with them. Nobody tells them anything. You know, they've got no problems. You know what? I have a police department right next door here. Right next door to me. And you know how long it takes for them to respond to a call? 45 minutes?
I bet, yeah. And that's like that's what I was saying earlier, is that police don't prevent crime at all, you know. And that's not actually the police's job, believe it or not. If you look up what the word police means, it means policy enforcer. That's what police means. So they enforce the policy that the corporations through the medium of the government enact. So believe it or not, police are not there to protect and serve you. They're there to protect and serve the corporate interest. That's what they are. And that's exactly, you know, police don't prevent crimes. That's actually a big misconception that the unfortunate U.S. citizen believes. But go ahead. Sorry for cutting you off.
No, and actually I can add on to that because I was a police officer, and guess what? You know what? I never responded. I always responded to crimes. There was never preventative action. There was never We never had an opportunity to say, oh, I'm going to go out in the community and start policing and talk to everybody and try to be the Andy Taylor of the community because I've got plenty of time to do it. No, by design, it was made that I have to arrest 4 or 5 people. I have to pull them into the jail, haul ass right back out of the jail, come right back out, arrest somebody, throw them back in, and not be given the time to think about
what I'm doing. You had a quota.
The revolving door, right. They call that the revolving door, and that's all it is, right.
Yeah, you have a quota.
Thank goodness I had seen through it even when I was actually still part of it, but what do you do when you're part of it? You know, I mean, it's hard to get out of it. And then when you get out of it, you're trying to pull other people out of you with it.
And that's the unfortunate problem, because I'm sure there's a lot of law enforcement out there, you know, everything from police officers to sheriffs to CIA agents. They know what they're doing is just BS. But, you know, a lot of them are scared to get out of it. A lot of them, you know, they have their own families to look for, so they need that paycheck even if they're hurting other people and they know they are consciously. It's like, think about it. How many times have you ever seen a happy police officer? They're usually bitter and pissed off as hell because they know what they're doing is BS. But you know, you don't know their situation. They probably have a wife and kids to eat, and they have no education. So it's like they're kind of forced to submit themselves to that. You know, not necessarily forced, but you know, they're statistically not likely to get out of it. But you know, but to remedy.
If you look at it, just like what you said there, Joe. I mean, my father straight out was a federal agent. He came up from a local law enforcement and went up into federal agent, and he would straight out tell me, you know, he goes, look, son, I mean, it would be great if you learn how to do something else. If not, this is going to be our job. This is what I do. And you know what? He goes, I'm not happy with what I do. I serve the beast. He actually would tell me things like that. He goes, we serve the beast, and that's what we're going to have to do. And, you know, you're not going to be happy with a lot of things you have to do. Well, you know what? I just wish he would have known, or somebody else would have told me at a younger age, you know what, there's other alternatives. There's other things that you can do. You can get away from the system. You can get above the system. You can think outside the box. Things like Joe's bringing up. These are fantastic things, you know.
And exactly. And, you know, and I think, you know, that's what we as our generation, and particularly what I want to proliferate through the Pyramid Center, is to give people that purview or that ability to see outside of just necessity. You know, I have to do this. I don't want to do it. You know, give them something more than just the necessity of being something that they hate to be because they need to be in a system that they don't understand, you know, because again, like I even mentioned before, nothing that we do in this society is convenient. It is not convenient to go to school for 5 years to make bare necessity, to pay for bare necessity your whole life just to be a slave and die a slave when you're 67 years old. That is not a convenience at all. You know, it's just it may be a comfort versus going out in the middle of nowhere. There might be a temporary comfort to that, but it is not a convenience at all. So If we do things like the Pyramid Center and these self-sustaining communities where people are helping each other out, and people are educating other people about different concepts and projects, then, without burdening yourself of the violent overthrow of the government or anything like that, people can actually start to do something about the situation that we're in. And, I honestly believe that if you educate people, and this is why I even mentioned, Tim, when we were talking earlier, why I was mentioning the whole concept of like magic and spirituality, and the reason these things ought to be spiritual than just strictly communities based on necessities, because if you can understand things like the electromagnetic life force, and I mean, if some of your audience might think it's outlandish to talk about magic or whatever, I can give the audience several references if they want to do their own personal research on this. Then what authority does somebody like the Vatican or, somebody like any of these ABC organizations at the top, which, even a lot of Masonic occult leaders have been accused of being able to wield the electromagnetic force, what authority do they have above you truly that you don't have yourself? Can you imagine if people really had the power of telepathy and these kinds of things? The reason the system works the way it does, the way as well as it does, is because of people's ignorance, which is their fear. If you can eliminate that fear because the burden of necessity isn't standing over their head every single day, then they have the time and opportunity to explore their inner potential. And, that's another thing, like a landmark of what I want to do at the Pyramid Center. Self-sustaining is just one aspect of it. That just satisfies the necessity of life, but by no stretch of the imagination is that where I want to stop. I actually want to go much, much, much further than that and enlighten individuals. And I guess, for all intent and purposes, try at least to educate them about the different facets of magic so they can, in hopes, get the same type of power that these criminals running the world have, So...
Yeah, I think that's actually where somebody needs to start, Joe. We actually need to make people realize that there's things like energy healing, that there's things that actually do work out there. There's alternative forms of energy, alternative forms of diet. There's things that we've been oblivious to for generations. There's things that you're bringing back and ideas that you're bringing back that are gonna bring people literally back to life and bring back their quality of life. And I think a lot of people need to realize that.
Right, absolutely. And, that is one of the things that I want to do, because it's just like that's what keeps people subjugated into this virtual drudgery that we have from cradle to grave, And if you can just teach people about the true inner power of themselves, their own healing capabilities, their own infinite electromagnetic life force within themselves that has so much power and potential, all you have to do is be an example. Just like you said, it has to start somewhere. Once you get an example, it's just a domino effect at that point, and then, and I truly believe that sometime, within the near future, 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, we'll look back at this time and say, my God, how could people even live like that, So...
Yeah, I agree with you there. I'm actually starting to see that where you see some people online now are actually starting to wake up, and it's starting to turn into communities that people are saying, if it's not really organic, if it's not really grown by us, we're going to have to stop buying it. And that's what I'm hoping that some of you guys are listening out there will do. Stop buying all this junk food. Tell everybody around you, show them how much poison it really is. If we stop buying all this crap, then they won't give it to us anymore.
Right, yeah, well, exactly. They've engineered it that way, so it makes it taste good. It's easily packaged, easily accessible. It's right down the corner, and we've got an abundance of it.
Isn't it horrible that now they made us taste each other good? Now we've got Pepsi. It's giving us what are they giving a human DNA? And Sugar Baby's got human DNA, and Splenda has now human DNA also. Yeah, I mean, wow! Since when did we start tasting good?
So much, and we brag about how much of an advanced civilization we are from the cannibalists of the Savage era, right?
I guess finally some of the upper echelons figured out that maybe all we are is actually cannibals, and maybe that's the easiest way to control this.
Well, they do. By legal definition, I don't know if you know this, but by legal definition, the word human actually means half man and half animal. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, I knew about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, no, literally, they do think we're animals. So that's actually not a joke what you just said there.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point, guys. If you no longer want to be an animal, if you no longer want to be cattle, if you no longer want to be sheep, listen to people like Joe. Help people like Joe out. Help the Pyramid Center out, and help this station out. Guys, I'm out. make sure you guys stop in and check out the swag, check everything out, and make sure you help Tim out of the show. I'm out of here. Fantastic to talk to you. I'll be on Joe, and hopefully we'll get you on somebody else's show or on mine, and we definitely want to get your word out, and fantastic work. Fantastic work, Tim. Good night, guys.
Thanks.
All right, good night.
Thanks for that, Rick. He hosts a show here on Mondays at 8 p.m. Good guy, and greatly appreciate the shout-out. And so I guess any final thoughts here before we head on out? Greatly appreciate you joining us, Joe.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And anytime, I'm definitely, I love what you guys are doing. So just let me know, and I'm definitely back on the show anytime you guys want to know. And yeah, just everybody check out thepyramidcenter.org if you have any questions. Email me directly at joe@thepyramidcenter.org. That's joe@thepyramidcenter.org. And of course, I encourage all your audience members to help out what you're doing over there, Tim, because you're doing a great thing, and together we can definitely make something happen. So let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And I greatly appreciate you joining us in your busy schedule. And like I said, I mean, everything that you're doing, and like Rick had mentioned, I mean, everything that you're doing is positive, and it's in good nature. So, I mean, it can't help but bring positivity in return. And people like you and platforms like you do have in this Pyramid Center idea is such great outlets for people to better their mind, to better their spirituality, and to get out there. And it's not about the buck. It never has been. And when the day when it starts becoming about the buck is when you've lost yourself. And I mean, you could understand that. And so I greatly appreciate you joining us. And people, like you had said, follow his website, thepyramidcenter.org. And I say follow. I don't know why I say follow. I got that Twitter thing in my head.
That's the Twitter, right?
Yeah. So go to thepyramidcenter.org, and that's .org. Make sure you don't forget that. So thepyramidcenter.org. And Joe, I greatly appreciate. And Dolezal, which is spelled DOLEZAL 83.
That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Dolezal. You can say Dolezal for this purpose. Dolezal 83 at yahoo.com. And do check him out. I greatly appreciate you joining us in your busy schedule. And maybe one day we'll have you on in the near future.
Let's do it.
Okay, I greatly appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Tim.
All right, great.
All right.
And if the studio